Ek wil vanoggend gesels oor fondasies, about laying foundations and the importance of laying foundations. And that's what we've been doing this whole year. I want to start with a quote. That first slide second slide says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And so, New Year's resolutions are good. It's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think the bad thing is that most of us never keep them. But I want to talk a little bit about why we don't keep them. And the other thing is goals. So, goals we set, and we have these ideals and things we want to reach in life or achieve. And it's good things. We must have goals. Goals are good. But for some reason, most people never reach those goals. And the main reason is this quote. Because you can have the greatest ideals, the greatest goals, the greatest dreams, things you want to become. But if you don't have the systems to get you there, you will never get there. If you don't put the things in place that you need to put in place, that will set you up to get there, you will never get there. And the foundation of any building is the most important thing of any building. Now, foundation simply is 'n gat in die grond en die groen gras groei daarom. It's a hole you dig, and you put concrete in it, and they reinforce it with metal. And the better your foundation, the stronger your foundation, the higher you can build, and the further you can go, and the bigger you can go. But if your foundation is lacking, if you've got a bad foundation, or even if you put the foundation on ground that is not strong enough, the foundation fails and the house fails. And I want us to talk about that today, a little bit about foundations and a little bit about something about what Jesus teaches around foundations. And I'm going to give you a list of things that Jesus talks about, but the list is way bigger than that. Part of this thing, the systems that this guy talks about, is he says there's two major things that determines if you reach your goals or not. And he says the first most important thing is your identity. Because you will only do what you believe you are. You will only act out what you see in yourself. So you can think that I'm going to be the best rugby player ever, but you've got no talent at all. That might be a great ideal, and it might be a good thing to strive for. But if your systems don't allow that, you'll never get there. And if you don't have the talent and you don't believe that's who you are, you will never do that. So this is one of the reasons we spent like almost 3 months talking about identity this past year. For you to understand who you are. So I add another one to this quote, and I say the other one you must know is who Jesus is. Because if you don't know who Jesus is, you don't know who you are. And that's why we preach through the book of John in the beginning of the year, so that we would understand who Jesus is. So we are intentional about what we teach and what we preach, because we want you to lay a strong foundation. Because if the foundation is strong, whatever we build on top of that will stand. If the foundation is strong, hardship can come. Difficult times can come because the foundation is strong. It's exactly what Renee was sharing. Her foundation is the Word. So when a year like 2023 comes, the foundation has been laid already. The most difficult thing to fix is a broken foundation. Because there's already a lot of stuff on top of that foundation. Sometimes it's simply easier just to break everything off and start over again. Because if the foundation is not right, you've got trouble. So I want to read out of Matthew chapter 7. We're going to go to verse, we're going to start at the end, and then we're going to go back again. Verse 24 says, now this is Jesus himself speaking. He says, therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them to practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down and streams rose and wind blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down and the streams rose and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. So Jesus is saying exactly what I'm saying now. Is he's saying that if you hear what I'm saying and you apply these things, you will be like a house built on a firm foundation, on a good foundation. And then the winds can come and the storms can come and the water that rises can come because the foundation is strong. You build on the rock. Another important scripture that we can look at is another place. Jesus talks about this rock. He talks about, he's got this conversation going with Peter. And Peter, well, Jesus asks the disciples, and he asks them, who do you say I am? So Matthew 18. And he then says, Peter says, you are the Christ. You are the Messiah. You are the Son of God. And then Jesus says to him, and it's very important to understand these words. Jesus says to him, you, Peter, have received this from heaven. You've received this revelation from God. And on this I will build my church. And then he says, Peter, you are the rock. And it's not because Peter was special, and it's not because the church is built on Peter. The church is built on that truth, who Jesus is. The revelation of who Jesus is. And that's important. The rock we build on is Jesus. We do not build on any other foundation except Jesus. The moment we build on anything that's not Jesus, we've got trouble. The house will not stand. And that's why we say we are a Jesus church, and we will talk about Jesus. People often ask me before church, like, what are you preaching about? My answer is always Jesus. Because that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to boast about Jesus. I'm going to bring honor to Jesus. I'm going to lift up Jesus. In our preaching, in our singing, in everything we do, it's about Jesus. Nothing else. So this is the end of chapter 7. So Jesus says, the things I just told you, if you build your life on that, that's a good foundation. So now let's start at verse 1, and we're going to look at a couple of things. And like I say, this is not the list. It's a list of things we can look at going into 2024. Things that might challenge you a bit, but it's things that will set you up. It's a system that you can put in place that will position you for where God wants to take you. Because that's the important thing, is it's about positioning yourself. Verse 1 says, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. And people love this verse. Mostly people who don't follow Jesus love this verse, because they'll use this verse to attack us and to say, didn't Jesus say you shouldn't judge? Didn't Jesus tell you that you should not call out things in my life? And yes, Jesus did say, do not judge, because the measure that you judge with will fall on you. But it goes a little bit deeper than just that. First of all, judgment, the term judgment talks about mostly the final judgment. The fact if somebody's going to heaven or to hell. And first of all, that's the thing that we do not have the right to do. Because not one of us knows whether somebody will go to heaven or hell. None of us know. But there's even a deeper problem here. If you find yourself judging people, that means you've got a your understanding of Christianity is wrong. Your understanding of the gospel, the message of Jesus is wrong if you start judging people. Because what you do when you judge someone is you do this. If I look at you and I judge you, I've already done this, and I'm looking down on you. And the more I do that, the more I do this. Because what judgment does is it says in some way I'm better than you, and that I can make a call on your final destination, which is simply not true. The truth is, like, a judgmental person has a serious sin problem. And the sin is called self-righteousness. You see, what the gospel teaches, what the message of Jesus teaches is this. It teaches that not one of us are perfect. As a matter of fact, not one of us are good. Not one of us have the ability to be good enough to go to heaven. Somebody asked this week, he said, if you stand before Jesus now, today, and he asks you, why should I allow you into heaven? What would your answer be? What would you say to Jesus to, well, let's use the word, convince him to allow you into heaven? And most people will say, well, I'm a good person. I've done good things. I've given to the poor. I went to church. I read my Bible. I did the things. And you know, it's really scary. We'll get to that verse just now, but there's a verse that Jesus says here in chapter 7. He says, you've prophesied in my name. You've chased out demons in my name. But I will say to you, go away, because I don't know you. And if you had to stand in front of Jesus today, your response should not be all the good things you've done. Your response should be, Jesus, because of who you are. If you understand this truth, that what gets you into heaven is not you, what gets you into heaven is what Jesus did and who he is. And that should be your first response. If somebody says, what gets you to heaven? Not me. Because it was on me, I'm not going there. If I was the standard, I'm not going there. But if Jesus is the standard, I'm going there. What judgment does, it says, my good makes me gooder than you. My good makes me better. And because I'm better than you, for some reason, I can make a judgment call on you. And that's why Jesus is saying this. He's saying, don't judge people because you don't have the right, the authority, or the moral stance to make a judgment on somebody else. And then he says, you hypocrite. You've got a plank in your own eye, but you're trying to remove the speck out of somebody else's eye. And I think this verse is a little bit unfortunate, because this can become an excuse that I'm not perfect enough, so I can't help somebody else. This is not the case. In context, it's talking about people who are judgmental. Because if you understand the gospel, if you understand the message of Jesus, you understand this. No one's perfect. All of us fight fights. All of us struggle. He's specifically talking about hypocritical people who judge. And he's saying to them, you think in your own righteousness you can help people. But you know what the gospel actually teaches? In my weakness, the fact that I know where I stand towards Jesus, the fact that I know the only way for me to live a full life and actually one day get to heaven is Jesus. That is the thing that allows me to help other people. So going into 24, let's remember that. The message of Jesus is this. No one's perfect. Jesus is perfect. And when I'm in Jesus, I become perfect. Not, once again, not about me, about Jesus. If we get that right. And you know what's crazy? If you understand your position in Jesus, you are fearful to judge others because you know your own stance. But if you become self-righteous and you think your works somehow makes you better than others, you're in trouble. Because you've moved from grace, a free gift, to works, your ability. Okay, so let's not do that. He goes on and then he says in verse 6, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. And I really know, I don't think I know this. There's people in your life, maybe, that they're pigs and dogs. There's people that are there to destroy you, to hurt you. There's people that are out to kill what God wants to do in your life. And this should be a yearly practice. But it's not just that things that I should do more of, it's also things I should do less of. And some people needs to be cut out of your life because they're not good for you. They're not good for you. They're not adding to your life. They're taking away from your life. You need to set up boundaries for certain people. And I get sometimes it's very difficult because maybe it's your boss or it's a colleague or it could be your mom. And just because they're your mom does not mean they're not toxic. And sometimes we need to cut toxic people out of our lives to step into what God has for us. And he talks about this here. He's saying that you've got this gift, you've got something in you. Don't throw your pearls to people that will simply just destroy what you have. So maybe it's time for us to put up some boundaries. And I want to add just this, that if you find yourself around toxic people and you can't do anything about that, you need to somehow balance that out. To get positive people, Jesus people around you more than the times you spend with those people. Because the more they drag you down, you need people that will drag you up. People that will hold you, cover you, be with you, encourage you. Verse 7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks the door will be open. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone, sorry? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. But this is so important to understand this. Asking, seeking, knocking. It shows something of urgency, need, and a pushing into something. There's something you still have to do. That you need to be seeking and looking and finding and be aware and looking for the opportunities that God has for you. We can become very complacent as believers. That we sit back and we look and say, God is going to do X, Y, and Z, but we don't act. James, Jesus' brother, he says that if your faith, your belief in Jesus does not create action, yes, and he says it's so rough. He says you've got a weak religion. Because your faith in Jesus must produce action. And it's not the action that saves you. It's the fact that you are saved that you act. It's the fact that you know Jesus that you do things for people, for the kingdom, for the church. It's the fruit of living with Jesus that you start doing things. We've turned that around. We want people to do things until they're good enough, then Jesus will accept them. No, it's because Jesus has already accepted me that my expression and my gratefulness and my worship to Him is these works, is these deeds. And when we work, minister, when we tithe, when we come to church, it's not to earn anything, it's to express what we've already received. Our worship flows from our experience with Jesus. We don't experience Jesus in worship. Worship is the expression of our experience. Praat ek te veel vandag? God gives good gifts, and He's got good gifts for you. The bad things that happen to us, the promise is that God will turn the bad things in your life to good things. The bad things in your life does not always feel like good things, but the promise is God's going to turn them to good things. And God does not give us bad things, because He's a good Father that knows how to give good things. And if there's bad things in our lives, we need to maybe seek, ask, knock, to figure out why these bad things are happening. And then also to seek, ask, knock, to find out what God is going to do with this bad thing. Daar's hierdie baie slegte grapie, mag hom in elk geval vertel. Hulle sê, as 'n vrou 'n ongeluk maak, what happens when a woman makes an accident? Drives, she shouts. A guy, nee, Hy ou van brakpan af, hy sê, hou my dop vas, check die move. And I want to apply that to this. When bad things come into your life, when hardship comes, when the storms comes and these things, I want to almost say, hou my dop vas, check die move. Because it's not my move, it's Jesus' move. It's something Jesus is going to do. And that should be our mentality when hard things come across our lives. Relax, watch what God will do. Check the move. See what Jesus will do. And Jesus carries on and he says in verse 13, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. This is one of those verses that people have taken and they've interpreted in such a way that they've destroyed the understanding of who Jesus is. You see, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through Jesus. I don't know if you've ever seen these posters. Some intelligent guy made this poster of the narrow way and the wide way. And then the wide way is all these sins that they've made pictures of, and then it eventually leads to hell. And then the narrow way is all the good things you do, and then Jesus is there. And as nice and as pretty as whatever practical it might be, it's not true. It's simply not true. The way to Jesus, well, the way to heaven or the way to God, I just said it now, I'm going to say it again, is not sinning. Not sinning happens when you meet Jesus. And the closer you move to Jesus, not sinning will happen. And some of us will struggle with certain sins until the day you die. Unfortunate truth. I don't know why. But some things we will overcome because of Jesus. But what happens is that this picture that he draws is totally wrong, because yes, the wide gate is for people who don't accept Jesus. But you should start there. The narrow gate is not a pathway, it's a person. It's the person Jesus. And when you accept Jesus, you enter the way. You are in. Now you don't have to navigate all these rules and all these tight corners, and if you just make one mistake, you've fallen out of the narrow way, and now you need to achieve and be perfect and be good again to get back to Jesus, because He's the way, the truth, the life. He is the door. He is the narrow way. It's not an actual way. It's a person. We need to get that. And that's why Jesus says it's a narrow way. Not because it's an actual path. It's because there's only one way. The narrow way is Jesus. I think I picked too many verses for today. Verse 15. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, But inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus by their fruit you will know and recognize them. And so there is a test. And this test is specifically for prophets or false prophets. But it's also a test for people that you follow. When you follow people or listen to people, don't listen to people who don't have the fruit in their lives that shows that they know Jesus. Because where they are planted, the foundation in their lives will produce certain fruits. I'm going to make this statement. Hidden fruit is always a red light. If you can't see what's going on in somebody's life, it means there's hidden things there, and that by itself is a fruit. We need to live lives that's open in the light. Because things in darkness is a red light. That doesn't make sense. It's a dark light. Things that is hidden will always be a red light for you to know something's not right here. We don't want to take advice and follow people and listen to people we don't know. It's great to listen to preachers on the internet, on TV, but the problem is you don't know these people. How can you trust these people? You don't know how they treat their kids. You don't know how they treat their wife. You don't know what they do in their private lives. Don't listen to them. You can be encouraged by them, but don't allow them to determine where you're going in your future. Because it's so easy for them to be false prophets, be wolves that only wants negativity in your life. I'll close with the last one. Verse 21, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. That's a scary, scary verse. But it's only scary if you put those things, those works, above a relationship with Jesus. In the church, we've made this mistake often, that we place spirituality or holiness or a good relationship with God next to a preacher or a prophet or somebody with a title, and we think them very spiritual because outwardly they do these crazy things. They prophesy and they pray and demons manifest, and we think that's spiritual. We think that means they're very close to Jesus. Well, Jesus says something totally different here. He says that's not the test. The test is, does this person know Jesus? Is there fruit in their lives that they know Jesus? Are they living a life that shows they live close to Jesus? Because the show the church show does not show anything, because it becomes a show. Your life, your fruit in your life shows where you stand with Jesus. And that's the test. And that is the foundation. In 1 Corinthians 3, Paul talks about this quite a lot. I think we'll talk about it next week, about 1 Corinthians 3. But he says this, he says, I do not build on anything except this foundation. The foundation that we've received. With Jesus being the chief cornerstone. Jesus pulling everything together, holding everything tight. And then he says, don't you know that you are the temple? And that God is busy building this temple. And He's busy adding to this temple. And then he closes that one verse and he says it so well. He says, you are the temple together. We can easily think that I can be a Christian on my own. No, you can't. You can't. You need this. You need community. You need people around you, because together we are the temple. Together we are the indwelling of the Spirit. Yes, you have the Spirit on your own, but there's something different and bigger that we can have as a community of people. So 2023 was laying foundations as individuals. And something for me in my heart is that 2024 is going to be, we're going to keep on laying foundations. But we're going to spend some time talking about what church is, what community is, what we are as a group of people. Because that is important, not just for me, but for us, but for the world. Because if the church knows who the church is, the church will do what the church does.